Welcome back to Fantasy Football Today, presented by BetMGM, the sportsbook born in Vegas. I'm Jamey Eisenberg. That's Dave Richard. That's Heath Cummings. Joining us now, it's our buddy Robert Turbin, former NFL running back, and certainly tied to the Seattle Seahawks organization. So, Robert, let's start right there. Last week, we were surprised because we saw Zach Charbonnet play more than Ken Walker and outproduce Ken Walker. From your perspective, who's the best Seattle running back heading into Week 2 and maybe the rest of season?
Well, I think it's Zach Charbonnet, unfortunately. I mean, I love K9. You know, he's my guy, good friend of mine. You know, he's an explosive player, but Zach Charbonnet just brings the consistency. He brings the physicality. You know, he brings what the Seahawks need in the backfield. Now, the question mark in regards to the Seahawks and both of these running backs is, you know, what are you going to get from the offensive line? And to me, the offensive line play, especially when you watch the tape, a little soft. And so that could be, you know, a negative for both of these running backs moving forward. But if I had to choose one of the two, I'm going with Charbonnet.
All right, let's see where Charbonnet and Ken Walker rank for us this week as we take a look at the consensus rankings for our running backs, starting with the list 1 through 12 here. This is, again, the list combination of myself, Dave, and Heath. And so when you take a look at the 1 through 12 list, you're not going to see any of the Seattle running backs here. Heath, you were the Devon Etienne guy all offseason. Are you still as confident after seeing this Dolphins offense that he can get the job done even in this matchup against New England?
RB1 this week. He's getting all the touches he needs. Listen, you're having a hard time protecting Tua Tagovailoa. He's having a hard time being accurate downfield. How about you just dump it off to the best pass-catching running back in the NFL?
Robert, when you see Bucky Irving and the performance that he had in Week 1 against Atlanta, how do you think he's going to do against that tough Texans defense this week?
Yeah, I think he'll have a repeat performance, especially when you think about the versatility in his game, right? Not just being able to do things on the ground, but his pass-catching ability, I think, separates him as well. And so I like him at 9 where you guys have him right here.
Catching a touchdown last week, as Dave said, maybe he'll be involved in the passing game as well. Let's take a look at the list 13 through 24 here. And do we get a Seattle running back on this list? Let's see here. Nope. Still no Seattle running backs. So, Dave, when you look at, we're going to talk about some of the surprise performances here, but one that we did not bring up is Alvin Kamara. And I know you were very high on him. Draft was very high on him, taking him in the 3rd round. What do you think of his Week 1 game against Arizona?
Saved by a touchdown and did not get nearly as many touches and targets and catches as I would have liked to have seen. And I can't help but wonder if this is the new normal for him going forward. There was somebody on this show that suggested that would be the case, and it's the man sitting to my left, Heath Cummings. I do think he still looked good. I still think the offensive line for New Orleans, when healthy, they're good. I think this offense in general isn't as bad as I thought it was going to be, but you have to downgrade expectations for Kamara if he's not going to see 5+ targets a week.
All right, next list, our final one that we'll look at, 25 through 36. Finally, we get the Seattle running backs here, and as you see, consensus-wise, we do have Charbonnet ahead of Kenneth Walker. And let's get into one of our topics here, which is the most surprise, impressive performance from week number 1. Robert, I'll start with you. Javonte Williams scored 2 touchdowns for the Cowboys. What does that mean for his outlook moving forward, knowing that Jaden Blue did not play and Miles Sanders lost a fumble in that game against the Eagles?
Yeah, I think he's the bona fide number 1. I think that's what last week proved for Javonte Williams. He's going to get all the opportunities there to be the bell cow back. So you should expect more carries, more opportunities outside of the backfield, and him being in the end zone a lot more. And so I have high expectations for Javonte Williams heading into this season and even more now.
Dave, for you, it was Breece Hall. And, you know, obviously I was very concerned about what he could do for this Jets team. He exceeded my expectations leaps and bounds. Where do we go with him moving forward?
He exceeded everybody's expectations except probably his own and everybody on the team. He looked great. The offensive line looked great. Playing off of Justin Fields gave him some lanes to run in. I don't see this slowing down. I think Breece Hall has become a must-start fantasy running back again. And as long as you've got him, use him. Think of him as a high-end number 2 fantasy RB.
We got the Seattle situation, Heath, maybe where there's a switch where the number 2 guy becomes the number 1. Do we have the same thing in Minnesota now with Jordan Mason and Aaron Jones?
I'm not entirely sure that the Vikings will see it that way, but that's the way it worked out in Week 1. And watching those 2 guys run, it felt like Jordan Mason should have had even more carries in opposition to Aaron Jones than he did. Aaron Jones, in comparison, just as a rusher, because he was good in the passing game, it looks like the only time you should really hand the ball off to Aaron Jones is when you're trying to make sure the defense doesn't think that every time he's in, you're going to throw it to him. Because if you really want to gain yards running the football, it should be Jordan Mason almost every time.
Robert, when you take a look at that situation, again, similar to Seattle, where it was a surprise to, I think, a lot of people that the workload was different, or at least the way that it came out, you know, where Jordan Mason looked as as well as he did, and Aaron Jones not playing as much. What's your take of what we see from this Vikings backfield moving forward?
Yeah, I think this was even more of a surprise than what we saw in Seattle. I think there was some speculation that, Zach Charbonnet had been outplaying Kenneth Walker III for a little while now. So I was shocked to see Jordan Mason get more work than Aaron Jones. But it just shows that there's a transition being had, in Minnesota. Aaron Jones, if you think about the offense, more of a slasher. Jordan Mason brings that physicality. He's going to get more opportunity, especially with the way that he produced in week 1.
For me, the surprise performance, and we'll get into the starts as well because it's a start for you, Heath, was Travis Etienne. And not only did he have a great game in week 1 against Carolina with 143 rushing yards, got the 3 catches, they liked him so much they got rid of his competition. They said, Tank Bigsby, you can go to Philadelphia, be the backup for Saquon Barkley. So, Heath, when we look at Etienne coming off of that game, now facing the Bengals, which their run defense was actually really good against the Browns. I don't know how much that's just the Browns. But how confident are you in Etienne in this week 2 game taking on Cincinnati?
So he's a number 2 running back for me, which is ahead of where he was last week. Everybody had him as a number 3, and it's not quite as good as he was last week when he was actually produced as a top 12 running back. He's not facing the Panthers, so you shouldn't expect him to run wide open down the field as often as he did in that game. But I don't know that the Bengals' run defense is quite as good as they looked against the Browns. I think that might say something about the Browns' run game right now. I think you view Etienne as somebody who's going to touch the ball 15 to 18 times a game, can do things in the passing game, and in this Liam Cohen offense also looks good as a runner.
Robert, your start is rookie running back Omarion Hampton. My start is rookie running back TreVeyon Henderson. We spoke last week about just the opportunity and outlook for some of these rookie running backs. So I'm going to give you the chance to talk about both. What did you see from Hampton in that game against the Chiefs in Brazil? What did you see from Henderson in his debut as they lost to the Raiders and another rookie running back in Ashton Jeanty?
Well, for Henderson, it's the versatility. They're going to use him in a multitude of ways. His upside is huge. For Hampton, he didn't really produce in the points. And I'll be honest, I think Hampton's one of those guys that maybe I overlooked a little bit, coming out of the draft and, looking at it from a fantasy standpoint. But when you watch him play, it's like, man, there's like a big play waiting to happen when he has the ball. That's the one thing that stood out to me when I watched Omarion Hampton. So in week 1, the points weren't there, but it feels like the points are going to start to be there for him more consistently. They're going to give him the ball. They trust him, and he's a big play waiting to happen, in my opinion.
The thing I like about both these guys is that the workload was definitely there for Hampton, and hopefully that will continue because we don't know what Najee Harris is going to do as he gets more comfortable coming back from the eye injury. The thing for Henderson, we got 11 PPR points on really was not a great game. Now, the passing down work was fantastic. J. Stevenson just looks like he needs to be on the bench, and so hopefully the coaching staff in New England realized that. Mike Vrabel said we got to get basically more work for Henderson, and so this could be the breakout game for both of these guys. Yep. Dave, the start for you is David Montgomery. I hope you'll bring up my favorite stat of the week, but I'm going to give you the opportunity to tell us why you think Montgomery could be great this week.
I don't know what your favorite stat of the week is with David Montgomery. I know that he's had a minimum of 10 fantasy points in PPR each of 3 games he's played against Chicago, 2 of them 14 plus. I think you can count on him for a touchdown, a couple of catches. I think the Lions get right back to basics this week against Chicago, and they start putting up points like we saw from them last year.
Robert, when you look at the Lions and their game against the Packers, it doesn't have to be just the running game, but just as a whole, how surprised were you that Green Bay's defense handled that Lions offense as well as it did?
Not surprised. New offensive coordinator, right? First game together, right? Good defense in Green Bay Packers. Obviously, Micah Parsons on the side of the football now, putting pressure there on the quarterback. So not shocked, man. Whenever there's newness like that, it's going to take some time to get that thing going. But I'm not worried about the Lions either. I think they're going to be totally fine.
I think they bounce back this week. And Dave, my favorite stat about David Montgomery, he's only had one time since he's been a member of the Detroit Lions where he's gone consecutive games without scoring a touchdown. So I don't know if that carries over.
He didn't score last week,
He didn't score last week, so I don't think we're going to get it twice. So I think he finds the end zone in this matchup against the Bears. All right, let's talk about some running backs we're looking to avoid. So, Robert, you watched that game, obviously came away pleased with Omarion Hampton and the workload. You can't be pleased with Isaiah Pacheco and the workload that he had for the Chiefs, and he's a guy that you're going to try to avoid this week.
Yeah, not at all, man. Isaiah Pacheco definitely on my bench this week. You think about the workload last week. It's probably going to be similar. Then they're playing with the Eagles, I think, this upcoming week.
Yep.
And so you're playing against a really good defense. The run game hasn't been strong for the Chiefs in a little while. And so for me, can't trust it. Got to sit them.
Heath, where are you at with the Chiefs? I mean, you didn't really, get a chance to talk about Mahomes and sitting him. I know he's not a start for you. Pacheco, I don't think you're on board with him. You weren't on board in the preseason. So, how do you think this game unfolds for them offensively?
I'm shocked they're 1.5-point underdogs. I think if it didn't say Kansas City in front of their name, then you're probably looking at a 6.5-point spread in this game. They don't have enough pass catchers, and they're not going to until Rashee Rice gets back. This looks like a 2-4 team to me after week 6, and they probably win 10 in a row.
And for what it's worth, Worthy not ruled out yet, but we don't expect him to play in week 2. Coming off the shoulder injury. All right, Dave, a guy that you're sitting this week is Tony Pollard, which I know Heath is probably not going to agree with. So let's have a little Tony Pollard conversation here.
So let's just start with the matchup. He's going up against the Rams. I think the Rams everybody's going to do a great job against the Texans' run game, but they're a tough run defense. And I worry about the Titans. First of all, their offensive line, is it going to be at full strength? The workload's going to be there for Tony Pollard, but I still think that the Titans are going to end up leaning on Cam Ward throwing the football downfield a lot more in the second half if they're trailing. And I think that they'll be trailing in this game. So Tony Pollard may be good for around 8 or 9 fantasy points, PPR or non-PPR.
Yeah, he had 9.9 last week against the Broncos in full PPR. And so I think whether the Rams are a good or bad matchup, they're not the Broncos. This should be a better offensive performance for the Titans. Pollard is still the most likely Titan to score a touchdown. If you're telling me he's going to score 9 to 10 points a week without a touchdown, then there's going to be some 16-point weeks in there as well. Hopefully he sees more than one target. That was the biggest disappointment for last week. Nobody expected good rushing efficiency. It'll be better this week.
RJ Harvey's a guy that you're looking to sit. Heath and Robert, you can help Heath out here on maybe the breakdown of the Broncos running backs after he's done. So was it just more about J.K. Dobbins and what he was able to do and maybe not what RJ Harvey did?
RJ Harvey is the very opposite of Tony Pollard. Like, the efficiency was fantastic. He had the big play. It looked great. He's not a starting running back for his own team. He's not really even a 1B right now. He's just a backup running back who gets 5 to 7 touches. Hopefully that changes really quick. I think we're all hoping for that. But this is one of those situations where after what we saw in week 1, you can't start him until we see something different in terms of usage.
Robert?
Yeah, I mean, he reminds me kind of like a Jaleel McLaughlin, from last season, who might have some spark games, catching the ball on some screen passes and taking it to the house. He's got great speed. He can be explosive. But in terms of the consistency, being there and being able to produce in fantasy, I don't see that being there at least early on in the season. And so, I agree with Heath in terms of sitting him.
Yeah, we'll see if Sean Payton says, wow, that 50-yard run. I don't know if Dobbins is going to do that right now. Maybe we just give RJ Harvey a little bit more work, but be patient as a fantasy manager. Hopefully those will come. And the sit for me is Ken Walker. We spent some time talking about this already, why Robert thinks it's the Zach Charbonnet show. I think we're all in agreement right now that Charbonnet looks like the better of the 2 running backs in Seattle. So that'll do it for our running back conversation. Robert, thanks so much for joining us. As always, we're going to take a break right now. We come back and get into the wide receiver rankings and tell you about the guys we're looking to start and sit for week number 2.